Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip Hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Big shout out to the producers of this podcast, the people who support this podcast every month with donations over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you like the content I bring to you weekly, if you are a hip hop head and you stay informed, or you just like my jokes, visit patreon.com/hiphopnow. We are trying to step up the production a little bit more of this show. But right now, you know, the couple of folks that have been looking out has kind of helped us work it out. Now, when I say step up the production, you know, it's my garage, you know. But as you can see, I got the cassette tapes, many of which I bought as a kid back in the 90s, and I still have them. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me if I listen to them on tape. I don't want this record player over here to eat the tapes, if you know what I mean. 50 years of hip hop. Now, please note that this podcast is also available in video and audio form on your favorite podcasting app. So if you're listening to audio, that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all that good stuff. If you're looking for video, well, for one, if you're hearing this, the link is in the description of this episode. But more importantly, you can visit Hip Hop Now Podcast on YouTube. Now, let's get right into the business. Oh, first and foremost, before we get into the business, what am I talking about? Fly, Eagles, fly. You know what I'm saying? You see the colors. You can't really see the eagle on there, you know, but you will. Okay? Now, let's get right into the business. Sheik Louch calls Migos the locks of the South. Now, before you dirty tins boom bap heads get all excited, let's just see what he means by that, because I don't wear Timbs anymore. I haven't worn them in 20 years, but I'm getting excited also. Like, I'm getting upset, you know. You can visit hiphopdx.com to check this out, and shout out to them. I didn't do my usual salutations, but y'all know what it is. Speaking to a DJ that shall remain nameless, even though he is the source, so I must name him DJ Vlad. Sheik had this to say, and I quote, "Yeah, earlier when they said they feel like the best group out, they supposed to feel that, like that. They made a hard impact in this and that." Damn it, Sheik, pause. But you know, I told you how I feel about who is the best groups. Rest in peace to that brother. He's talking about Takeoff. So sad, man, because every time I seen him, he was cool as hell. I don't know too much, but he was just cool and laid back. Okay, come on, Sheik, get to the business of it. So essentially, it just looks like, for the most part, and I'm not going to watch Vlad's video. I'm not going to press play on it. He's not going to get any of those from me. But essentially, from what I can gather from other sources, the camaraderie is what reminds him of the locks, and the consistency as a group. Now, I know you are saying to yourself right now, you cannot compare these groups. One group has bars, the other one is Migos. But I don't think he meant it in a way as to one-for-one lyrics, you know. I think he meant as a group and their identity, as far as like how they felt about themselves, how they felt about each other. We know there was some issues, and I'm not talking about what happened recently with the Grammys, but just some issues in regards to some contractual stuff. But nevertheless, them being this trio for a number of years now, because this is the thing that, and I'm not trying to get on my generation, not trying to get on older generation, but I think sometimes we don't pay attention to how long some of these newer dudes are on top of the game. Like, they didn't just get here. They've been here for a while now. They're kind of a mainstay. They may be considered old school to an even younger hip hop fan, and not younger than us, but I mean younger than somebody you would call young, maybe somebody in their 20s. But, we all know 16-year-old hip hop head is like, I don't listen to them, they're old, So I get the mutual respect for the trio and what they've done for hip hop. But I think comparing them to the Lox is just, no one's ever going to see that. No matter how you slice it, no one's ever going to see those comparisons as being the same beyond three dudes that rap. I'm just saying. So no go on that. Jim Jones basically said recently that the Dipset crew started the mixtape wave. Now, hold your horses, everybody from NY, from the 90s. We know mixtapes have been around for a long time, and the definition of what a mixtape is changed over time. It's changed throughout the years, to be honest. I'll give you a quick history lesson if you don't know. So, and I'll put a link in the description to an episode of Apartment 5B that I'm featured on, where we talk about the history of mixtapes. Or you could just check out our 50 Years of Hip Hop episode. But nevertheless, so the mixtape game was traditionally a DJ on the tape spinning the dopest records that were out. Generally, that's what it was. It was about the technique of mixing and scratching and playing the hottest records. It was like having a playlist, but you got a DJ like a Kid Capri or Ron G or whoever doing the mixes. Then in the mid to late 90s, some of that still existed, but then it became more about, if you ask me, exclusives and freestyles from rappers. Mixtapes became, don't get me wrong, the hot records were still there, but they were mixed in with records that were like unreleased or never heard before, or different versions or remixes, along with a couple of freestyles. At some point, the freestyles started to get more attention than having an exclusive or just the dopest records out. So mixtapes, and we getting into the whole Jim Jones, Dipset, G-Unit era of mixtapes. Mixtapes started to take on a form where cats were making songs that wouldn't appear on the album. Sometimes beats that you wouldn't hear on another album. Sometimes it being a record that and this, in the case of G-Unit, these artists or this artist are rhyming over these records that are well known. Now, I will say this. Oh, and just to say, because 50 Cent is a troll, and some people would think like, what would 50 say? Well, 50 just kind of laughed it off as being like, yeah, not true. My opinion on it is, I feel like G-Unit and Dipset, and probably G-Unit first, but G-Unit and Dipset sort of kind of got that wave going as a unit, no pun intended, because 50 was making them G-Unit mixtapes, to me, a little bit earlier than when Dipset had their series of mixtapes. It felt like it was one or two G-Unit mixtapes, them early, 50 Cent is the Future joints. And then somewhere within that wave, when Cam went to Rockefeller for the most part, he started to get the Dipset mixtapes, series of mixtapes. Both crews had series of mixtapes, and at one point they were both just dropping them joints. So I think they kind of co-started that wave, that version of mixtapes in the early 2000s. The difference to me in the two is that when you listen to the G Unit mixtapes, a lot of it was 50 and Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo rhyming over, tracks that already existed. Later on, they were more original tracks that never made albums that made those mixtapes. And they had a hell of a run with those mixtapes. With Dipset, it felt like some of the same thing, right? But I think their mixtapes contained a little bit more of the original beats on the mixtapes. But again, both did what they did. Now, who had the better series of mixtapes? It's tough to call because I could think of some classic Dipset mixtapes, you know what I'm saying? Especially those early ones, especially like 1 through 3. Like that was a movement and a moment at that time, like just influencing everybody, not just Harlem, everybody. But then them early G Unit mixtapes, and even a little bit later, right? 06 and 07, and even some of those later mixtapes were just as dope, and they contained more, rhyming over original tracks. If I had to pick one, I'd say that G Unit had the better series of mixtapes because even though early on they started with, kind of 50 remixing other people's records, they were just more memorable to me as far as, the humor, the diss records to Ja Rule. And then when they started using their own beats, 50 was picking some really crazy beats, like that one joint. I don't remember the name. Maybe I'll pop it up on the screen. But I remember that one joint, that G Unit mixtape that had Fat Joe on the cover, the real Fat Joe, when he was Fat Joe. On the beach. It was like called Elephant in the Room or something like that, or On the Beach or whatever it was. And they sort of flipped the Crush Groovin' beat. And 50 killed that joint. Like, just some really dope mixtapes with some really dope original beats. No, this is no slight to what Dipset did. I mean, frequently I go back to both from time to time because it just was a dope time for hip hop. There's always, hopefully, there's always these moments in hip hop. Well, no, it's 50 years of hip hop. If it's 51 for you, that means you're from the future and you know what to do. Get your punk ass out of here. But nevertheless, I felt like it was always these resets in hip hop with these like moments where everybody's excited about these things, something that somebody new is doing, and it's not just one cat, it's like several of them. And I feel like, I guess you can point to like Griselda being a more recent example of that. But back then, to have like 50 blow up, but then he got a crew and everything they putting out is hot. And then Cam goes to Rockefeller, and it's almost like he's different, but he's freed up, and now he got a crew. Now we know, I think G Unit is nicer because you could take 50 and Lloyd Banks and put them against the whole Dipset, and Cam is the dopest. And don't get me wrong, J.R. Ryder and Ungot, we know all them cats was dope too, but just not on that level of spitting. But nevertheless, who started the wave? I don't think either one of them started that wave. I think it was a combination of both putting out, dope records, dope mixtapes, and that in itself created the wave or that version of popularity with mixtapes. So what do you think? Do you think Jim Jones is right? Do you have the dates on what mixtape came out when? All I can go from is what people were talking about and what was dominating that. And there was a point where it was just G Unit and 50 is the future. And then it became Dipset just a little bit later. It might have been within the same year, to be honest, but nevertheless, a dope time in hip hop. I need you to go after this video and check out That Time in Hip Hop, celebrating 50 years of hip hop. It's hosted by myself and the homie Tone of IntoTheDome.com, and also features another co-host of mine on the podcast, Hip Hop Twitter, Yintz. And we basically go through hip hop's history, but not necessarily trying to jot down and mention every single thing that happened in hip hop. Mostly highlights and eras and how we define those eras, and a couple of moments here and there, and also our personal stories from the time we first heard hip hop to what we thought about the East Coast, West Coast thing, to the Source Awards, to what we think about the future of hip hop or just hip hop today. So if that sounds like something you would like, get comfy, because unlike this podcast, that podcast is much longer. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. So you can listen to it like an hour, go do your thing, come back to it. But I will say, if you are a younger fan and you're watching this, if you are a person who knows hip hop but feel like, you can learn a little bit more, or if you're a person who knows absolutely nothing but you wish you did, it's the perfect podcast to listen to or watch on YouTube to kind of give you some context behind 50 years of hip hop music and culture. The link to that is in the description of this episode. Billboard released their top 50 greatest, I'm going to say it slow for y'all, greatest rappers of all time. Now, some people will preference lists like this and say no order, because they don't want y'all arguing over who's in front of who. But they have an order. I'm not going to read all 50. I'm going to read 20 of them, right? I think 20 of them. I think that's what this is. Before we begin with who's on the list, let me just tell you the criteria, because I believe that is the most important part of this that some have missed or ignored. Billboard says, the team took into account the following criteria, not in any particular order: body of work / achievements, which means charted singles, albums, gold, platinum certifications; cultural impact / influence, which means how's the artist's work fostered the genre's evolution; longevity, years at the mic; lyrics, storytelling skills. What? Okay. And flow, vocal prowess. Now, when you read that, seems to be pretty comprehensive, if you ask me. I mean, who can hate on that? I mean, it's Billboard, right? Certification and all of that should be there because it's Billboard. I think some people missed that part because, they wanted to be angry about album sales, but it's Billboard. Do you know what Billboard does? So right then and there, if it says Billboard's top greatest hip hop albums, rappers of all time, right then and there, you know what this is. This is a Billboard list. You're either going to be angry, you either want to read it because you're curious, or you're just going to get the hell out of it and go on with your life. One or the other. But this list has angered a couple of people, and we're just gonna go ahead and go over it. We're going to start with number one. Number one, at the top of the pile, 50 greatest hip hop artists, rappers of all time. And number one is Jay-Z. Number two is Kendrick Lamar. Number three, Nas. Number four, Tupac. Number five, Eminem. Number six, Biggie. Number seven, Lil Wayne. Number eight, Drake. Number nine, Snoop Dogg. Number 10, Nicki Minaj. Number 11, Kanye West. Number 12, Andre 3000. I don't know how you could be on this list without Big Boy is out. Okay, whatever. We'll get to that. Number 13, Rakim. Number 14, LL Cool J. Number 15, J. Cole. Number 16, Scarface. Number 17, 50 Cent. Number 18, Ice Cube. Number 19, Missy Elliott. And number 20, Big Daddy Kane. Now, before you get all upset and all up in arms, you heard what the criteria was, right? Album sales plays a role. To them, lyrics means storytelling. And then there's flow, right? Vocal prowess. Okay, and impact on the game, right? Moving the culture forward with the music and the bars and all of that and everything you present as a rapper, right? And longevity. Now, let's pick apart this list. Jay-Z at number one. Now, look, let me just say this. I don't care about this list because, for one, it's extremely difficult to do a list like this. That's one. Even if you have criteria that makes it pretty clear. What I don't understand, and I think this is why the criteria doesn't exactly work as a combination, or maybe it's too much criteria, but if we're counting on some Billboard stuff, Jay-Z should be top 5, but then Drake is kind of low. Peaches says, so is Eminem on this list. Drake being at 8 and Eminem being at 5. I mean, sales need to really push them forward in a lot of ways. I mean, I know Drake, his storytelling is just how much he's not going to be your friend and whatever chick broke his heart. That's not that creative, but nevertheless, he's here. Now, this list is weird, right? Because it doesn't represent, like when you read the top 10, right? Or the top 5, right? Jay-Z, Kendrick Lamar, Nas, Tupac, and Eminem. Sure, you can look at those and say, you know, they kind of check all of the boxes for the most part. But I don't know how, like, how do they define longevity when Tupac died in his 20s? I know it's not fair because he passed away, but it's the same thing with Biggie. That should knock him down a peg according to this list, right? But it's not. So it's sort of weird. And when you look at someone like a Nicki Minaj, now maybe I'm not as locked into her music as I should be. Maybe I'm grading her based off of singles only. Maybe her singles are one thing and the rest of it is boom bap straight out of Duck Down Records. I don't know, but I doubt it very highly. That's all I'm saying. She should not be in the top 10. But I think, and one last thing about this 20 before I get into the next phase of this, but to have Andre 3000 in the top 20 by himself, as if his body of work doesn't exist with a group member in Big Boy, then to me, he should not be on this list, or at least not ranked that. He shouldn't be on this list because what the Love Below only, and he makes the top 15 of this list. I don't get it. I don't get it. And then I also don't get, like, damn, well, how many records did Big Daddy Kane sell? I know he was hot back in the days, but most old school rappers didn't sell that well, including Rakim. Um, and when you think about who I consider to be the GOAT, LL Cool J, he created consistency. Now, I'm not talking about all the albums being dope, but if you want to put record sales in this, okay, cool. You're putting record sales in it, well then, this man was platinum for decades. Platinum albums didn't matter if the album was whack or dope, it was platinum. Hits. The longevity wore some, but I mean, I'm saying, but I'm not here to make a case of LL. I'm here to point out just the holes in this list is ridiculous. But you gotta see who they have at the end of the list. That's what really blows your mind. You can debate that top 20 based off this criteria all day long. KRS-One would not be in that top 20 because, record sales. That's probably why he's not there. But let's go to 50 and down. Now, we're not going to do all of them. But remember, this is the greatest of all time. 50 greatest rappers of all time list. Starting with 50, Rick Ross. Kind of disrespectful to Rick Ross in some ways to be damn near not making the list, but he is there. Number 49, Run from Run DMC. Extremely disrespectful from a rapper standpoint. 48, Melly Mel. What else we got? 47, MC Lyte. Nicki Minaj is like number 20, and MC Lyte is 47. How about that? Jadakiss is 46 on this list. This is not top 5 dead or alive. Probably dead more than anything to be 46 for Jadakiss. We know those albums. I mean, number 45, Ice-T. Who else we got? Number 44, Queen Latifah. How disrespectful is this list? Nicki Minaj might not even agree with this list. I'm sorry. Like, at this point. But nevertheless, number 43, Bun B. Now, I know what you're saying. Whoa, he was a huge kid. Bun B got a solo career, so relax. It's not the same as 3 Sacks. Look at number 42. Number 42 is Redman. Let me tell you something real quick. Let me sidebar for a second. There aren't many hip-hop groups or solo artists that had consistently dope albums. And I'm not talking about 1 to 2. I'm talking about 3 to 4. Redman had 3 albums. Those 3 albums sound nothing like one another, and they were all dope. I don't count Doc's name because it got weird by then, but nevertheless, even that wasn't that whack. 42, the man freak 42, but Billboard. Number 41, E40. Which seems kind of far for E40, somebody who is so unique with his style. Like, to me, his style gives him a ton of points because you can't mistake anyone for E40. E40 is E40. No one's ever bit off that style or whatever because he's him. Maybe somebody did, but he was so whacked, nobody knows. Maybe cats from Oakland know, but I don't know. And number 40, Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre is ahead of Jadakiss on this list. Dr. Dre is number 40 when we know he's been successful as far as charting and longevity. We know he don't write his own rhymes, but then you might as well make this last couple of people who don't write their own rhymes. And the list goes on and on and on. Now, again, just so people who may have forgot what I just said in the beginning, hold up, people trying to sneak in their commercials, but no, you don't. Again, This is Billboard. Not in any particular order. The teams took into account, teams, not one person did this, but teams took into account the following criteria. We're going to go again. Body of work, achievements, right? Cultural impact, influence, longevity, lyrics, and flow. Let me tell you something. It's one of the reasons why I do not do top 50 list, top 25, top 10, top 5, half the time, bars. But for 50 years of hip hop, I'm going to break some of those rules. But one of the reasons why I don't do it is because, for one, it's subjective, even if you have a team. In that case, it probably was very, very weird because who's on his team? And there's probably one or two boom bap dudes there who are outnumbered by, radio play hip hop fans. But it's Billboard. That's the thing you have to remember. And then in a lot of ways, again, and I'm not going to belabor this whole thing because who cares what their list is for the most part, but it's interesting to talk about. But you can't put too much stock in lists like this because once hip hop heads see that title, and you may not be mad at Jay-Z being at the top. Some people will be, but most may not be mad seeing him at the top. It's when you start to go down that list and you see Kendrick behind him, and then you see Nas behind Kendrick, and you see Nicki Minaj on the list, and you see 3 Stacks and No Big Boy as far as within that top 20, right? You start to wonder what the hell is up with this list, right? No Kool G Rap, no KRS-One in that top 20. It seems pretty insane to not include some of the most skilled rappers or put them higher up on the list. Now, again, maybe they were sandwiched somewhere in the middle, but nevertheless, to not be in that top 20 with that criteria, even with the criteria, it still seems pretty shaky. But at the end of the day, man, it's their list, and some may feel differently, right? For example, hip hop heads, boom bap heads, whatever you want to call them, will look at that list and say to themselves, I don't think I've ever heard a Kendrick Lamar song or album that's better than Illmatic or King's Disease. Like, that's the type of debate you're going to get. Some people who do not mess with Eminem's subject matter will never have him in the top 5 of all time. Just wouldn't happen. Some people have never heard entire Nicki Minaj albums. I'm just saying, it's 50 years of hip hop. Like I said before, everybody wants a piece of it. Everybody, rightfully so. Billboard, rightfully so. Everybody wants to have a say in it, or create content for it because everybody's going to check for it. To be honest, all the fans, hip hop is going to be on the edge of everybody's tongue every 5 minutes, right? And again, I'm not saying pause for that because you know what I mean, okay? The Grammy salute to hip hop in its 50 years, it got people going, So now, Wu-Tang show about to drop, which I'm going to do reviews of those episodes. It's going to be a special year for hip hop. LL Cool J, the GOAT, announced he has a new album coming out executively. Q-Tip is the executive producer. I don't know what that's going to sound like. Doesn't mean it's going to be bad. Doesn't mean it's going to be good. But I see a year where we're just going to get a bunch of dope albums from legendary artists, from artists who are hot right now. I just think we're going to get every hip hop wish possible. But coming off of the hype of the Grammy situation to having this list just literally poke the air out of the goddamn balloon Uh, it's hip hop in 2023, to be honest. So it is what it is. All right, y'all. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Vegas World INC. Please know that this podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts in audio form, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and Spotify. If you're on Apple Podcasts, drop a review for me. Let me know what you think of this episode. Let me know what you think of the entire podcast. All of it helps. If you would like to support the podcast, you can visit patreon.com/hiphopnow. The link to that website is in the description of this episode. And again, check out my 50 years of hip hop on the show That Time in Hip Hop. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes of straight up history, facts, nostalgia, and personal perspectives as hip hop fans. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic, I do not work for Billboard, but I am a fan.